Jake Morrison stepped off the shuttle and felt the warm breeze of Zephyr hit his face. The air smelled different here, like ocean water mixed with something sweet he could not name. His boots touched the soft blue sand of the landing platform, and he looked around at the strange new world that would be humanity's first real contact with another intelligent species. The planet was beautiful in ways that made his chest tight. Crystal formations grew like trees from the ground, and they glowed with soft light that changed colors as the wind moved through them. Water flowed everywhere, not just in rivers but in streams that seemed to float through the air itself. The sky was a deep purple color, and 2 small moons hung visible even in the daylight dot behind him. His team was gathering their equipment. Dr. Lisa Adams carried her language computers and translation devices. She had worked for months to learn what little they knew about the Nihilari language from the radio signals they had received. Dr. Carl Johnson pulled his biological scanners from the shuttle. He was excited to study the first alien life forms humans had ever met. Amy Foster checked her diplomatic protocols one more time. She had studied every first contact procedure the Earth government had created. Jake straightened his uniform and looked toward the group of beings approaching them. The Nihilari moved like they were swimming through the air instead of walking. Their bodies were tall and graceful, with skin that looked like it was made of blue glass. He could see what looked like gills on their necks, opening and closing as they breathed. Their eyes were large and dark, and they seemed to catch the light and reflect it back in different colors. The leader of the group stepped forward. She was taller than the others, and her skin had silver patterns that moved and shifted like living tattoos. When she spoke, her voice sounded like water flowing over stones, musical and soft. "Welcome, travelers from the star called Soul," she sighed, and Jake was amazed that he could understand her. The translation device Lisa had created was working perfectly. "I am Caravel, Elder of the Northern Reef. We have waited long for this day." Jake stepped forward and tried to remember all the diplomatic training he had received. "I am Commander Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Horizon. We come in peace and friendship, hoping to learn about your people and share knowledge of our own." Caravel's skin patterns shifted to brighter colors, and Jake hoped that meant she was pleased. "Your words bring joy to our hearts, Commander Morrison. We have prepared a place for you and your companions. There's much to discuss." As they walked toward the Nihilari settlement, Jake noticed another member of their group. She was smaller than Caravel, with skin that was a deeper blue and patterns that seemed to pulse with a rhythm like a heartbeat. She stayed close to the elder but kept looking at Jake with what seemed like curiosity. Her eyes were especially bright, and when she looked at him, Jake felt like she was seeing something in him that he did not even know was there. The Nihilari city was unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. The buildings looked like they had grown from the ground rather than being built. They curved and flowed like waves, and water ran through and around them in patterns that seemed both random and perfectly planned. Gardens of plants that glowed with their own light filled every space, and the sound of moving water was everywhere. "Your city is beautiful," Jake said to Caravel as they walked. "Beauty is the gift of understanding," she replied. "When mind and water flow together, all things find their proper shape." The younger Nihilari moved closer to Jake. "I am Nyatem, sister-daughter to Caravel," she said, and her voice was even more musical than the elders. "I have studied your species through the signals you sent. I find your ways of living very interesting. What would you like to know about us?" Jake asked, trying to be friendly. "Your rituals of cleansing," Nyatem said immediately. "How do your people prepare their bodies and spirits for important moments? How do you wash away the old to make space for the new?" Jake thought this was an odd question, but he tried to answer. "We have baths and showers to clean our bodies. Some people have religious ceremonies, but mostly we just wash to stay healthy and clean." Nyatem's patterns shifted to colors Jake had not seen before. "Just for health?" she asked, and something in her tone made Jake think he had said something wrong, but he could not figure out what. They reached a large building that curved like a shell. Inside, the walls were covered with pictures that seemed to move and change. The floor was made of something that felt soft under Jake's feet, and pools of glowing water were set into the ground at different levels. Caravel led them to an area with seats that seemed to be made of the same growing material as the buildings. "We have much to discuss," Caravel said. "Trade between our peoples, sharing of knowledge, the future of both our worlds." The formal meetings began, and Jake found himself impressed by how intelligent and thoughtful the Nihilari were. They had technologies that worked in ways completely different from human science, but their results were often better than anything Earth had created. Their understanding of biology and genetics was far beyond human knowledge, and their ability to work with water and crystalline structures was like magic. As the hours passed, Jake noticed that Nayatem continued to watch him closely. During breaks in the discussion, she would approach him with questions that seemed to focus on human customs and rituals. She asked about human ceremonies for important life events, about how humans prepared for meeting new people, about the role of water in human culture. "Do your people have ceremonies for joining with others?" she asked during one break. "We have weddings when people get married," Jake replied, "and various religious ceremonies depending on what someone believes." "And these ceremonies involve cleansing?" Nayatem asked. "Sometimes," Jake said. "Some religions have baptism, where people are washed with water, but it depends on the person's beliefs." Nayatem's patterns shifted again, and Jake thought he saw something like excitement in the way they moved. "Your species has wisdom in the ways of water," she said. "This brings joy to my heart." As the day continued, Jake found himself feeling more and more tired. The stress of first contact, the long journey to reach this world, and the mental effort of dealing with an alien culture were wearing on him. His team was handling their parts of the mission well, but Jake felt the weight of responsibility for the success of humanity's first diplomatic contact with another species. When the formal meetings ended for the day, Jake was looking forward to returning to the shuttle for food and rest. As his team gathered their equipment, Nayatem approached him again. This time, she carried two vessels that seemed to be made of crystal but flowed like water. The liquid inside glowed with soft blue light. "Commander Morrison," she said, and her voice was softer than before, almost shy, "I would be honored to offer you the cleansing of welcome. In our tradition, when important visitors come to our world, we prepare them for the significance of the moment through the ritual of sacred waters." Jake looked at the vessels she held. The liquid inside moved in patterns that were beautiful to watch, and he could feel warmth coming from them. After the long day of negotiations, the idea of a relaxing bath sounded wonderful. But he was also very tired, and he wanted to get back to the ship to review the day's progress with his team. "That's very kind of you," Jake said, trying to be polite. "But I think I'll just clean up back on the ship tonight. I need to prepare for tomorrow's meetings." The light in Nayatem's vessels seemed to dim, and her skin patterns shifted to colors Jake had not seen before. Her large eyes looked at him for a long moment, and Jake thought he saw something like disappointment in them, but he was too tired to think about it carefully. "Of course," she said quietly. "Perhaps another time." As Jake and his team walked back to the shuttle, he noticed that several Nihilari were watching them go. Their patterns seemed subdued, and Jake wondered if he had somehow made a mistake. But the day had been successful overall, and he was confident that tomorrow would bring even better progress in building the relationship between their two species. He had no idea that his simple refusal had started a chain of events that would threaten everything they had come to accomplish. Jake woke up feeling refreshed and ready for the second day of negotiations. The ship's recycled air felt stale after breathing the sweet atmosphere of Zephyria, but he had slept well and felt confident about the progress they were making with the Nihilari. His team had spent the evening reviewing the day's recordings and preparing for the next phase of their diplomatic mission. Dr. Lisa Adams was already at her workstation when Jake entered the shuttle's main area. She looked up from her translation computers with a frown on her face. "Commander, I've been analyzing the language patterns from yesterday, and I'm finding some inconsistencies in the translation matrix. Some of the words the Nihilari use seem to have multiple meanings that our system didn't catch." What kind of multiple meanings? Jake asked, pouring himself coffee from the ship's dispenser. It's hard to explain, Lisa said, pulling up displays of sound waves and linguistic analysis. Their language appears to have layers. What sounds like one word to us might actually be several concepts combined. The computer is translating the surface meaning, but I think we're missing deeper significance. Jake nodded, not too concerned. Keep working on it. Every first contact has communication challenges. We'll figure it out as we go. When they returned to the Nihilari settlement, Jake immediately noticed that something was different. The welcome they received was still polite, but it lacked the warmth of the previous day. Kiravel greeted them with formal words that felt rehearsed. And the other Nihilari who had been so curious about humans the day before now kept their distance. The most obvious change was in the environment itself. The glowing plants that had been bright and colorful yesterday now seemed dimmer. The water that flowed through the city moved more slowly, and the musical sounds it made were lower and sadder. Even the crystal formations that grew throughout. The settlement had changed color, shifting from bright blues and greens to deeper, more muted tones. Dr. Carl Johnson was the first to comment on the change. The bioluminescent patterns in their skin are different today, he whispered to Jake during a break in the discussions. Yesterday they were bright and varied. Today they're much more subdued. It's like they're all in some kind of stressed state. Jake looked around the room and realized Carl was right. The Nihilari who had been so animated and expressive yesterday now seemed withdrawn. Their skin patterns moved more slowly, and the colors were darker and less vibrant. Even Kiravel, who had been so welcoming, now spoke in careful, measured tones that suggested she was being very careful about her words. "Where is Nayatem?" Jake asked during one of the breaks. "I haven't seen her today." Kiravel's pattern shifted to colors Jake had never seen before. "She's engaged in contemplation," the elder said. "She will not be joining us for the formal discussions." Something in the way she said it made Jake think there was more to the story, but he did not want to push too hard. First contact protocols emphasized the importance of not being too intrusive about alien customs. As the day continued, Jake found the negotiations becoming more difficult. The Nihilari were still polite and willing to discuss trade and technology sharing, but they seemed less enthusiastic about everything. Proposals that would have excited them yesterday now received only cautious consideration. When Jake suggested expanded cultural exchange programs, the Nihilari council members looked at each other in ways that made Jake think they were having conversations he could not hear. Amy Foster was keeping careful notes on the diplomatic atmosphere. During lunch, she pulled Jake aside. "Commander, I think we have a problem. The Nihilari are acting like they're going through the motions, but their hearts aren't in it anymore. Something happened between yesterday and today that changed their attitude toward us. Any idea what it might be?" Jake asked. "I've been thinking about it all morning," Amy said. "The only unusual event yesterday was when that young Nihilari, Nayatem, offered you some kind of ceremony with those glowing vessels. You declined politely, but maybe that meant something different to them than it did to us." Jake thought back to the previous evening. Nayatem had seemed disappointed when he turned down her offer, but he had not thought it was a big deal. "She offered to help me clean up after the day's meetings. I just told her I would take care of it myself back on the ship." It seemed like a reasonable response. "Maybe to us," Amy said, "but we're dealing with an alien culture. What seems reasonable to humans might be insulting to them." The afternoon session was even more strained than the morning had been. The Nihilari answered questions and participated in discussions, but Jake could feel that something fundamental had changed. It was like talking to people who were being polite because they had to be, not because they wanted to be. Lieutenant Ben Carter, Jake's security chief, approached him during a break with concerning news. "Commander, I've been monitoring the area around our landing site. The Nihilari guards have doubled their patrols, and they're keeping much closer watch on our shuttle. They're also communicating with each other more frequently, using those light patterns on their skin instead of speaking out loud." "Any sign of hostility?" Jake asked. Not hostile, exactly, Ben said, but definitely more alert. Like they're expecting something to happen, or like they're not sure they trust us anymore. Jake felt a knot forming in his stomach. Everything had been going so well yesterday, and now it seemed like the entire mission was falling apart, and he had no idea. As the formal meetings drew to a close, Jake decided to try a direct approach. Elder Caravel, I hope I haven't done anything to offend you or your people. If there's been a misunderstanding, I would like to address it. Caravel's patterns shifted through several colors before settling on a deep blue that seemed sad. Commander Morrison, your species is very different from ours. Perhaps too different for the kind of relationship we had hoped to build. I don't understand, Jake said. What has changed since yesterday? Understanding cannot be forced, Caravel said. It must be offered freely and accepted with respect. When it is rejected, it cannot be offered again. Jake felt like he was missing something important, but he could not figure out what. If I've done something wrong, please tell me so I can fix it. Some things cannot be fixed, Commander Morrison, Caravel said softly. They can only be learned from. As Jake and his team prepared to leave for the day, Nayatem appeared at the edge of the gathering area. She was carrying the same crystal vessels from the previous day, but now they seemed dimmer, and the liquid inside moved more slowly. She approached Jake with hesitant steps. Commander Morrison, she said, and her voice was barely above a whisper. I would like to offer you the cleansing of understanding. Perhaps if you experienced our ways, you would see the harmony we wish to create between our peoples. Jake looked at the vessels she held. The liquid inside still glowed, but weakly, and he could see that her hands were trembling slightly. After the difficult day of negotiations, he was even more tired than he had been the day before, and he was worried about the deteriorating diplomatic situation. Nayatem, I appreciate the offer, but I think what we need right now is better communication. Through our translation systems. Lisa is working on improvements that should help us understand each other better. As soon as the words left his mouth, Jake knew he had made another mistake. Nayatem's skin patterns flashed bright red for just a moment and then faded to a gray color he had never seen before. The liquid in the vessels she held suddenly stopped glowing entirely, and she stepped back from him as if he had struck her, around them. The other Nihilari who had been watching the exchange made sounds that Jake's translator could not interpret. Their patterns shifted to colors that seemed angry and sad at the same time, and several of them turned away from the human delegation entirely. I understand, Nayatem said, but her voice was so quiet Jake could barely hear her. I will not offer again. She turned and walked away, and Jake noticed that the other Nihilari moved aside to let her pass, their patterns shifting to what looked like expressions of sympathy and sadness. Jake stood there holding his breath, knowing that something very important had just happened, but having no idea what it was. As his team gathered their equipment and headed back to the shuttle, Jake felt the weight of failure settling on his shoulders. He had been chosen for this mission because of his diplomatic skills and his ability to work with people from different cultures. But he was clearly failing at the most important assignment of his career, and he did not even know why. Jake spent the entire night staring at the ceiling of his quarters, unable to sleep. The events of the second day played over and over in his mind like a broken recording. He kept thinking about the way Nayatem had looked at him when he refused. Her offer again, and the way all the other Nihilari had reacted. Something was very wrong, and he felt like he was failing at the most important mission humanity had ever undertaken. Dr. Lisa Adams was already awake when Jake found her in the shuttle's main workspace at dawn. She had been working all night, surrounded by displays showing language patterns, sound waves, and translation matrices. Her hair was messy, and she had dark circles under her eyes, but there was excitement in her voice when she looked up at him. Commander, I think I've found something important, she said, pulling up a new set of displays. I've been analyzing the deeper structure of the Nihilari language, and I was right about the multiple layers of meaning. Their words don't just describe things, they describe relationships and intentions and cultural significance all at the same time. Jake sat down next to her, hoping she had found the key to understanding what had gone wrong. What does that mean for our communications with them? It means we've been having completely different conversations than we thought we were having, Lisa said. Look at this. She played back a recording of Nayatem's voice from 2 days ago. When she asked you about cleansing rituals, the word she used wasn't just about physical washing. In the deeper context, it carries meanings related to spiritual connection, formal commitment, and something the computer translates as soul binding. Jake felt his stomach drop. Soul binding? And when she offered you the cleansing of welcome, Lisa continued, she wasn't offering to help you get clean. She was offering something much more significant. Lisa's fingers flew over her keyboard, pulling up more analysis. The phrase she used translates more accurately as the ceremony of joining spirits or the ritual of becoming one. Oh no, Jake whispered, beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. It gets worse, Lisa said. I've been analyzing the recordings from yesterday, and when she made her second offer, she used an even more formal version of the language. She was essentially asking you to participate in what appears to be their most sacred ceremony. Jake felt like he was going to be sick, and I turned her down twice. You didn't just turn her down, Lisa said gently. According to the cultural context I'm finding in their language patterns, you rejected what might be their equivalent of a marriage proposal. And the second time, you did it in a way that suggests you consider their traditions worthless. Dr. Carl Johnson and Amy Foster entered the workspace, both looking concerned. Carl was carrying his biological scanners, and Amy had her diplomatic protocols display with her. Commander, Carl said, I've been analyzing the biological readings I took from the Nihilari over the past 2 days. Their stress levels have been increasing dramatically, and not just from normal first contact nervousness. They're showing signs of what I can only describe as grief. Amy set down her display and looked at Jake with worried eyes. I've been reviewing first contact protocols all night, and I think we're facing a complete diplomatic breakdown. The Nihilari are going through the motions of negotiation, but their behavior suggests they've already decided this relationship isn't going to work. Jake told them about Lisa's discoveries with the language translation, and watched their faces grow more serious as he explained what his rejections had actually meant to the Nihilari. So Nayatem wasn't just being friendly, Amy said. She was making a formal offer of the most important ceremony in their culture, and you refused it twice. But I didn't know, Jake said. How could I have known? That's exactly the problem, Amy replied. From their perspective, you should have known. The fact that you didn't recognize the significance of her offer probably makes it even worse. It suggests that humans don't consider their culture important enough to study and understand. Carl looked at his biological readings again. There's something else. The scans show that Nayatem's stress levels are off the charts. She's not just disappointed or embarrassed. She's experiencing what appears to be genuine trauma. Jake felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. Not only had he potentially ruined humanity's first contact with an alien species, but he had personally hurt someone who had been trying to show him the greatest honor her culture could offer. Is there any way to fix this? Jake asked as Lisa pulled up more language analysis. I'm finding references to something called the cleansing of errors or the washing away of misunderstanding. It appears to be a ceremony that can be performed when cultural differences lead to unintentional offense. That sounds promising, Amy said. What does it involve? That's where it gets complicated, Lisa said. The ceremony requires the person who caused the offense to demonstrate complete trust in the other culture by participating in a ritual without knowing what it involves beforehand. It's supposed to recreate the original moment of cultural exchange, but with proper understanding. Jake thought about this. So I would have to agree to participate in their ceremony without knowing what it means or what will happen. That's, right, Lisa said. And it has to be a genuine offer of trust, not just a diplomatic gesture. The Nihilari would be able to tell the difference. Amy looked concerned. Commander, that's a huge risk. We don't know what their ceremonies involve. It could be dangerous, or it could commit you to something that Earth's government wouldn't approve of. But if I don't do it, Jake said, we lose any chance of building a relationship with the Nihilari. And I've personally hurt someone who was trying to honor me with their most sacred tradition. Carl looked at his readings again. There's something else we need to consider. The biological data suggests that this ceremony, whatever it is, involves some kind of physical or neurological connection. The Nihilari who participate in it show changes in their brain chemistry that last for days or weeks afterward. What kind of changes? Jake asked. I'm not sure, Carl admitted. But it appears to affect their memory centers and their emotional processing. It's like they're sharing experiences on a neurological level. Jake stood up and walked to the shuttle's window, looking out at the Nihilari settlement. The crystal formations that had been so bright and colorful on the first day were now almost completely dim. The water that flowed through the city moved sluggishly, and even the plants seemed to be losing their glow. The entire place looked like it was slowly dying. The whole city is reacting to what happened, he said. This isn't just about Niatem being disappointed. This is affecting their entire society, Amy joined him at the window. In some cultures, personal honor and community honor are inseparable. If Niatem was representing her people in making this offer, then your rejection might be seen as a rejection of their entire civilization. So what do I do? Jake asked. You have to decide whether you're willing to risk everything on a ceremony you don't understand, Amy said. And you have to do it knowing that if something goes wrong, it won't just affect you. It will affect the future of human-Nihilari relations. Jake looked out at the settlement again. In the distance, he could see Nihilari moving slowly through. Their city, their skin patterns dim, and their movements lacking the graceful flow he had admired on the first day. He thought about Niatem and the pain he had seen in her eyes when she said she would not offer again. Set up a meeting with Elder Kiravel, Jake said. I need to understand exactly what this ceremony involves, and I need to know if there's still a chance to fix what I've broken. Lisa looked up from her computers. Commander, there's one more thing. According to the language analysis, this ceremony can only be offered once per person in their entire lifetime. If Niatem has already made her offer to you, she can never participate in it again with anyone else. Jake felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Not only had he rejected the most important ceremony in Nihilari culture, but he had cost Niatem her only chance to ever participate in it. The magnitude of what he had done was almost too much to comprehend. Then I have to make this right, Jake said. Whatever it takes, I have to find a way to honor what she offered me, even if I can't accept it the way she originally intended. As his team prepared for what might be their final meeting with the Nihilari, Jake felt the weight of two entire civilizations resting on his shoulders. He had come to Zephyr as a diplomat and explorer, but now he realized he might have to become something much more than that if he wanted to save the future of human-alien relations. The meeting with Elder Kiravel was unlike any diplomatic session Jake had ever experienced. Instead of the usual formal gathering area, she led Jake and his team to a smaller chamber deep within the Nihilari settlement. The walls here were made of living crystal that pulsed with very dim light, and the only sound was the soft whisper of water flowing through hidden channels. Kiravel's skin patterns were darker than Jake had ever seen them, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made every word feel important. Commander Morrison, your Dr. Adams has requested understanding of our ways. This is ... unexpected. Lisa stepped forward with her translation devices. Elder Kiravel, we have discovered that our communication systems were not translating the full meaning of your language. We believe there have been serious misunderstandings. Understanding cannot be given, Kiravel said. It must be earned through experience. Your species seeks knowledge through words and explanations. Our species learns through the joining of spirits and the sharing of essence. Jake felt his heart beating faster. Elder, I believe I have unknowingly caused great offense to Niatem and to your people. I want to make this right, but I need to understand what really happened. Kiravel was quiet for a long time, her patterns shifting through colors that Lisa's computer could not translate. Finally she spoke. Nayatem offered you the ceremony of sacred waters, the most holy ritual of our people. It is offered once in a lifetime, and only to those whom we wish to welcome into the deepest levels of our society. I didn't understand, Jake said. Our translator made it sound like she was offering to help me wash. The sacred waters do cleanse, Caravel said. But they cleanse more than the body. They cleanse the barriers between minds, between hearts, between souls. When two beings share the sacred waters, they become connected in ways that last for all of their lives. Amy Foster leaned forward. Are you saying it's like a marriage ceremony? Marriage is a word from your language that carries meanings we do not share, Caravel said. The sacred waters create bonds that are deeper than what you call marriage, but different as well. It is a choosing to understand another being completely, to carry their experiences within yourself, and to allow them to carry yours. Carl Johnson was taking biological readings as discreetly as possible. The neurological changes we detected suggest some kind of shared consciousness experience. Your instruments see only the surface, Caravel said. The sacred waters allow two minds to become one mind while remaining two beings. It is how we learn to live in harmony with our world, by understanding it from the inside rather than studying it from the outside. Jake felt the magnitude of what Nayatem had offered him becoming clear. She was willing to share her consciousness with me? A complete stranger from another world? Nayatem was chosen by our council to be the first of our people to undergo the sacred waters with a being from another world, Caravel said. We believed that if our species were to truly understand each other, it would require more than words and treaties. It would require the joining of minds. And I rejected her? Jake said, feeling sick. You rejected her twice, Caravel said, and her patterns shifted to colors that seemed angry and sad at the same time. The first rejection we understood as the natural caution of a being from a different world. The second rejection told us that your species considers our most sacred traditions to be worthless. Lisa looked up from her translation computers. Elder Caravel, our analysis has found references to a ceremony called the cleansing of errors. Is this something that could help repair the damage that has been done? Caravel's patterns shifted again, and for the first time since they had arrived, Jake saw something that might have been hope. The cleansing of misunderstanding is an ancient ritual used when cultural barriers cause unintentional harm. It has not been performed in many generations. What would it involve? Jake asked. The one who caused the misunderstanding must demonstrate complete trust in our ways. By accepting a ceremony without knowing its nature beforehand, Caravel said. It requires a leap of faith that mirrors the original offer that was rejected. They looked concerned. What are the risks? The cleansing of misunderstanding can only be performed once, Caravel said. If it fails, if the participant shows fear or tries to withdraw, the misunderstanding becomes permanent. There can be no further attempts at connection. And if it succeeds? Jake asked. If it succeeds, the barriers between cultures are dissolved, and true understanding becomes possible, Caravel said. But success requires complete surrender of control, complete trust in the wisdom of the other culture, and complete acceptance of whatever experience the ceremony brings. Carl looked at his instruments. Commander, we have no way of knowing what this ceremony might do to your physiology. The biological changes we've observed in the Nihilari suggest major alterations in brain chemistry and neural pathways. Could it be dangerous? Jake asked. All true connection involves risk, Caravel said. The risk of being changed by the experience. The risk of seeing yourself and your world differently than you did before. The risk of caring about someone else's well-being as much as you care about your own. Jake stood up and walked to one of the crystal walls. The light inside it was so dim now that it was barely visible, and he realized that the entire Nihilari settlement was slowly losing its glow because of what he had done. If I agree to this ceremony, what happens to Nayatem? She can never participate in the sacred waters again because of my rejection. That is correct, Caravel said quietly. Her opportunity for the sacred waters is lost forever. But she could guide me through the cleansing of misunderstanding? She is the only one who can, Caravel said. The ceremony must be performed by the one who was harmed, as an act of forgiveness and trust. Jake closed his eyes and thought about everything that had brought him to this moment. He had come to Zephyria as humanity's representative, carrying the hopes and dreams of his entire species. But now he realized that the success of the mission would require him to become more than just a representative. It would require him to become a bridge between two completely different ways of understanding the universe. There's something else you need to know, Caravel said. The cleansing of misunderstanding is not just about repairing the damage that has been done. If it succeeds, you would become the first being to experience both human consciousness and Nihilari consciousness. You would carry the understanding of both species within yourself. What does that mean for my future? Jake asked. It means you would never be entirely human again, Caravel said. And you would never be entirely Nihilari. You would be something new, something that has never existed before. Amy stood up. Commander, you need to think about this carefully. If you go through with this ceremony, you might not be the same person who returns to Earth. The government didn't authorize you to undergo alien, consciousness-altering procedures. But if I don't do this, Jake said, we lose any chance of building a real relationship with the Nihilari, and Nyatem suffers for the rest of her life because of my ignorance. Carl looked at his readings again. The biological data suggests that the changes are permanent but not harmful. In fact, the Nihilari, who have undergone this type of ceremony, appear to have enhanced cognitive abilities and emotional stability. Enhanced in what way? Jake asked. Improved memory, better pattern recognition, increased empathy, and what appears to be some form of intuitive understanding that goes beyond normal learning, Carl said. Jake looked at his team, these people, who had trusted him to lead humanity's first diplomatic mission to another world. What do you think I should do? I think, Lisa said carefully, that this might be the only way to truly understand another species. Everything we've learned about the Nihilari suggests that they don't just think differently from us. They experience reality differently. Words and explanations might never be enough to build a real relationship with them. The risk is enormous, Amy said, but so is the potential reward. If this ceremony really allows you to understand both human and Nihilari consciousness, you could become the key to building a relationship between our species that goes deeper than anything we've ever imagined. Jake walked back to where Caravel was sitting. If I agree to do this, will Nyatem be willing to guide me through it? After what I've put her through? Nyatem has been waiting for your decision, Caravel said. Despite the pain you have caused her, she still believes that understanding between our peoples is possible. She has agreed to perform the ceremony if you choose to accept it. Jake took a deep breath and thought about the young Nihilari who had offered him the greatest honor her culture could give, and whom he had unknowingly rejected twice. He thought about the dimming lights throughout the settlement and the grief he had caused an entire civilization. He thought about the future of human-alien relations and the possibility of building something unprecedented between two species. Tell Nyatem I accept, Jake said. I'm ready to undergo the cleansing of misunderstanding. The sacred chamber was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Deep beneath the Nihilari settlement, carved from living crystal that had grown for thousands of years, the walls pulsed with their own heartbeat of light. Water flowed in patterns that seemed to defy gravity, creating spirals and curves through the air itself. The sound was like music, each drop finding its perfect place in a symphony that had been playing since before humans had learned to speak. Nyatem stood beside a pool that glowed with soft blue light. She had changed since Jake had last seen her. Her skin patterns were different now, more complex and deeper than before. When she looked at him, Jake could see pain in her large dark eyes, but also something else that might have been hope. Commander Morrison, she said, and her voice was quieter than he remembered. You have chosen to trust our ways, even though you do not understand them. This brings honor to your species. Jake stepped closer to the pool. The water inside moved in ways that water should not move, flowing upward in spirals and creating shapes that reminded him of living things. Nayatem, I want you to know how sorry I am for the pain I caused you. I didn't understand what you were offering me. Understanding cannot come from words, she said. It must come from experience. That is why we have the sacred waters, and why we have the cleansing of misunderstanding. Some knowledge can only be shared by joining minds. Elder Kiravel stood at the edge of the chamber with Jake's team. Dr. Adams was recording everything with her language computers. Dr. Johnson was monitoring biological readings, and Amy Foster was taking careful notes about the ceremony. All of them looked worried about what was going to happen to their commander. The ceremony will begin now, Nayatem said. Once it starts, it cannot be stopped. You must trust completely in our ways, even if what you experience seems impossible or frightening. If you resist or try to withdraw, the ceremony will fail, and the misunderstanding between our peoples will become permanent. Jake nodded. I understand. I'm ready. Nayatem raised her hands, and the patterns on her skin began to glow brighter. The water in the pool responded to her movements, rising up in spirals that reached toward the ceiling. Remove your clothing, she said. The sacred waters must touch your skin directly, with no barriers between you and the experience. Jake had expected this, but it still felt strange to undress in front of beings from another world. He handed his uniform to Dr. Adams and stepped toward the pool. The water felt warm against his feet, and he could feel a tingling sensation that seemed to go deeper than his skin. Enter the pool completely, Nayatem said. Let the waters cover you entirely. Jake waded into the pool until the glowing water reached his chest. It felt unlike any water he had ever experienced. Instead of just being wet, it seemed to carry energy that flowed through his body. His skin began to tingle more intensely, and he could feel his heartbeat changing to match some rhythm in the water itself. Nayatem stepped into the pool with him. Her movements were graceful and sure, like she had done this many times before. But Jake could see in her eyes that this was as new and frightening for her as it was for him. She had never shared the sacred waters with a being from another world. Now, we go under, she said. Trust in the waters and trust in me. Do not fight what you feel, let it happen. They sank beneath the surface of the glowing water together. Jake expected to hold his breath, but he found that the water filled his lungs, without causing him to drown. It was like breathing liquid light, and with each breath, he felt something changing inside his mind. At first, Jake was still himself, floating in the strange water with Nayatem beside him. But then the boundaries of his consciousness began to blur. He could feel her thoughts touching his, gentle at first, then stronger as the connection deepened. It was not like reading someone's mind. It was like becoming someone else while still being himself. Through Nayatem's consciousness, Jake experienced memories that were not his own. He felt what it was like to grow up in a world where water was alive, where every drop carried the memories of those who had touched it before. He experienced the joy of swimming through crystal forests, the peace of floating in pools that sang with ancient wisdom, and the deep connection that the Nihilari felt to every living thing in their world. But he also felt her pain when he had rejected her offers. Through her memories, he experienced what the sacred water ceremony meant to the Nihilari. It was not just a ritual or a tradition. It was the way they formed the deepest connections possible between beings, sharing not just thoughts and feelings, but the very essence of who they were. When Nayatem had offered him the sacred waters, she had been offering to share her soul with him. As the ceremony continued, Jake felt his own memories flowing into Nayatem's consciousness. She experienced what it was like to grow up on Earth, to look up at the stars and dream of meeting other intelligent species. She felt his excitement when humanity first detected signals from other worlds, and his determination to be part of the mission that would make first contact possible. Through his memories, she experienced human emotions and human ways of thinking. She felt the weight of responsibility he carried as the representative of his entire species, and his genuine desire to build friendship between humans and Nihilari. She also felt his confusion and regret when he realized what his rejections had meant to her. The sharing went deeper than memories and emotions. Jake began to understand how the Nihilari experienced reality itself. Their minds worked in ways that were completely different from human consciousness. Where humans saw separate objects and individual beings, the Nihilari experienced everything as connected parts of a larger whole. Water, crystal, plant, and person were all aspects of the same living system. Through Niatem's consciousness, Jake felt what it was like to sense the emotional states of everyone around him through the patterns of light in their skin. He experienced the way Nihilari could communicate complex ideas through color and movement, sharing concepts that had no equivalent in human language. He felt their deep respect for water as the source of all life and their understanding of how consciousness could flow between beings like water flowing between pools. Jake's human consciousness merged with Niatem's Nihilari awareness. Something new began to emerge. He was still Jake Morrison, human diplomat and explorer, but he was also something more. He could feel both human logic and Nihilari intuition working together in his mind. He could think in words and concepts, but also in colors and flowing patterns. The ceremony reached its peak when Jake and Niatem's consciousness became completely joined. For a moment that seemed to last forever, they were truly one being with two bodies experiencing the universe through both human and Nihilari awareness simultaneously. Jake understood, with a clarity that went beyond knowledge, why the sacred water ceremony was so important to the Nihilari, and why his rejection had caused such pain. Slowly, gently, their consciousness began to separate again. But the connection did not disappear completely. Jake could still feel Niatem's presence in a corner of his mind, and he knew that she could feel his. They would carry part of each other with them for the rest of their lives. They rose from the glowing waters together, and Jake realized that everything had changed. The chamber looked different to his eyes now. He could see the living patterns in the crystal walls, could feel the emotions flowing through the water, could sense the deep contentment radiating from Niatem and Elder Kiravel. "It is done," Niatem said, and her voice carried new harmonies that Jake's enhanced awareness could hear. "The misunderstanding has been cleansed. You carry our ways within you now as I carry yours?" Jake looked at his team and saw their amazement and concern. "I'm still me," he said, though he knew it was not entirely true, "but I'm also more than I was before." Dr. Johnson's instruments were showing readings he had never seen before. Jake's brain activity had changed in ways that seemed impossible. But he appeared healthy and alert. Dr. Adams' translation computers were picking up subtle changes in Jake's speech patterns, as if he was somehow speaking both human and Nihilari languages at the same time. Elder Kiravel approached them with tears of joy flowing down her face. "Commander Morrison, you have become the first bridge between our worlds. Through you, our peoples can truly understand each other." Jake felt the truth of her words in ways that went beyond hearing. He was no longer entirely human, but he was not Nihilari either. He was something new, a being who could understand both species completely and help them build a relationship based on true comprehension rather than just diplomatic agreements. In the months that followed, Jake became the foundation for a new type of relationship between humans and Nihilari. Others from both species began to participate in modified versions of the sacred water ceremony, each one creating new bridges of understanding. The crystal settlements of Zephyria began to glow brightly again, and human colonies learned to work with living water and growing crystal. Jake's final report to Earth described not just a successful first contact, but the beginning of a new chapter in the evolution of consciousness itself. He had learned that true understanding between different species required more than words and treaties. It required the courage to become